Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to episode 26 of Opening Basics. We're continuing our look at the Scotch game. In fact, we're going to finish up the Scotch game in this video, so let's get to it. We're in the E4, E5 family of openings, and now knight F3, the main move attacking, and knight C6 defending, and the characteristic move of the Scotch game, D4, continuing to attack the pawn on E5, and pretty much forcing this exchange. So after pawn takes, knight takes, that's the main line of the Scotch. We previously looked at, in the last video, we looked at the oddball move queen h4, going after the pawn, and knight f6. And knight f6 is one of the main lines, and the other main line in the Scotch is bishop to c5. And that's what we're going to take a look at in this video, as well as the move bishop to b4 check that ChessExplained likes to play. A bit of a sideline, but not bad. Bishop c4, bishop c5, in fact, is the choice that I made. I get this position a lot. I play e4. I play e5 as black, and so I had to come up with a line against the Scotch, and I chose to learn the bishop c5 line. The knight f6 line, I saw all those pins and tricks, and I thought, maybe it's a little bit complicated. But, well, this line has its own complications as well. Bishop c5, there's three responses here that White could consider. The knight is under attack, so something needs to be done. The knight can retreat to b3, attacking the bishop. The knight can exchange itself off on c6, or the knight can be protected with bishop to e3. Those are the three main moves. There are other legal moves there that are playable probably, but those are the three main moves. And that's what we're going to look at here. Let's take a look at knight b3 first. This is a little bit rare. It's not as common as the other two moves. The other two moves are about equal in popularity, and this is slightly less common. It kicks the bishop. The bishop wants to stay on this diagonal, so it drops back to b6. Not that diagonal, this diagonal. There's some interesting tactics against f2, so the bishop is trying to maintain that look across the center and at the king side. And now one of the ideas is revealed here where a4 could be played immediately, the idea being just to harass this bishop and gain tempos against it. Although the top choice here really is to play knight c3 first, and then after a developing move, say d6, then throw in the move a4, harassing the bishop. Now a6 needs to be played because the bishop needs a retreat square. It's in danger of getting trapped. And now you get knight d5, which is a nice move. Puts the knight on a good square and attacks the bishop. The bishop drops back, and now White decides to trade off that dark squared bishop with bishop to e3. So this bishop has nowhere else to go, and but Black doesn't really object to this trade. This is something that's pretty comfortable for Black as well. So after knight f6, bishop to d3, we get a situation where, if you think about it, the development is really about even. White has that one extra move in the development because he had the opening move, right? He had that move from the beginning. It's Black's turn to move. Both sides can castle, and so it's a pretty even position. White maybe has a little more center influence with his e-pawn, but this a-pawn is a bit unusual, and maybe Black can get some play against it. So overall, this position is about even, and so White players trying for a little more edge generally don't play that move, but it is kind of an interesting line to play. So something to consider. The second choice here is knight takes c6. So let's take a look at this line. I see this quite a lot in practice. This seems to be pretty popular. Just trading off that knight with a tempo, attacking the queen. And notice, though, that you don't have to take back right away. If you are going to take back, taking back with the b pawn is probably a little better. If you take with the d pawn, it allows this queen trade, which drags your king away from the king side. So better to take with the b pawn in this case. But what you can do is you can throw in this move queen to f6 instead of taking back immediately. And that threatens checkmate, which White has to do something about. So the most popular move for White here is to play the move queen to d2. And the queen on d2 defends the f-pawn. It stays out of the way of the light-squared bishop, so this bishop can come out perhaps on that diagonal. And also this lineup with the dark squared bishop and the queen allows the move queen to f4 in some cases. We'll see that. So now that this pawn is defended, there's no mate threat. white needs to get his black needs to get his material back, so he takes the knight. And now notice he takes with the d pawn. I guess it's sort of desirable for black to open up the d file. Maybe he'll get a tempo against the queen in some lines with rook to d8. So that's why taking with the d pawn is better here. Knight to c3 now, just developing. And now black has some choices. There's a number of moves that can be played here. There's bishop to d4, trying to put some more pressure on the knight, although kind of a move that violates some opening principles in that you're moving another piece, the same piece again, and not developing your pieces. The developing moves here, which maybe make a little more sense, are bishop to e6 or knight to e7. Now, knight to e7 is a bit tricky. So I'll go ahead and put this just because I think this is kind of a funny line here. Queen to f4 is the main move here. And the idea is that this queen trade is actually good for white because the bishop comes out and hits the c7 pawn, and now the king has to move to defend it. It's not so simple. I guess you could defend with the bishop. Here, let's go ahead and put this on the board. Queen takes, bishop takes. Yeah, you could play bishop to d6 or bishop to b6. Somehow this seems to give some kind of edge to white here. Knight a4 going after the bishop in this case. And if you defend to here, what's the trick here? You take and play f5. Or castle queenside and get immediate pressure on the d-pawn. So those lines seem to work out pretty well for white. So black is not tempted to go in for this queen trade, and instead continues developing with bishop e6. But now this allows white to really destroy black's pawn structure with queen takes, pawn takes. And the funny thing about this is that this is an okay position. It's in the opening book as about equal, and also it's rated by the chess engine as about equal. So somehow all of these pawn weaknesses are not enough of an advantage for white to really get anything going. It's not obvious to me, I'll have to say. So I don't like playing this kind of position for black, but if you want to try it out, in theory this is about an equal position. Okay, let's back up. So the way I would play in this case, rather than playing knight e7, is I would play the other developing move. I'd get the bishop out first. And now queen f4 is not so attractive. Among other ideas, black could trade queens and then just castle queenside. The king comes over to protect the pawn, and the rook goes to the d file with one move. So queen to f4 is not played in this line, and the main idea here is to, first of all, white could just develop with bishop d3 and castling. That's a fine way to play as well. Or white could play a little more aggressively with knight to a4, going after the bishop. But I think black is okay with just dropping the bishop back to d6. And it should be a playable position for both sides. Kind of interesting position you get with the Scotch game, with open lines in the center and just the typical play. So I think that's a fine line for both sides. Something I would recommend. Let's see, is there anything I missed along the way? After queen to f6. Yeah, that's right. Queen to d2. There is another option with the queen, which is second choice here in the database. Queen to f3. Another move I find kind of surprising. I always wonder about these early queen trades. Who's better off here? Notice that black's queen is protected by the knight at the moment. So this threat of a queen trade kind of keeps the knight tied down unless you want to allow your pawn structure to be disrupted. Black could, of course, take and disrupt white's pawn structure, but this doesn't seem to lead to a whole lot. Let's see, if you play queen takes f3, pawn takes, and now you need to grab the knight. Maybe taking with the b pawn in this case, so you have a little more center influence, would be good. And bishop to e3 is the move in the database here, just opposing bishops. It seems like this is a position black could go for if he just wanted to trade queens and get a defensible position. It doesn't seem like black has a real big advantage. I mean, white. It does not seem like white has a big advantage here. So why not just trade queens and simplify and go for an even position here? The top move in the database actually is not to take, but to leave the tension and to play b takes. And let's see, play might continue with knight to d2. Now the knight's defending the queen, so any trade is going to not do any pawn damage, so neither side wants to trade. Black continues with developing moves like d6, and well, the knight can go to b3. And now notice there is still some pressure here. This queen is taking a look at the b pawn, so it kind of keeps his bishop tied up, and then this queen is taking a look here, keeping the knight tied up. But it's not quite so simple. So bishop to b6. The bishop was hit by the knight, so it drops back. And actually, it is playable to play the move bishop to d2 here. It's one of the moves in the position. Because if you take here, then bishop to... if queen takes b2, then bishop to c3, defends the rook, hits the queen, and threatens the pawn on g7 there. So you can't really take. So that pressure on the b pawn is kind of an illusion. In this case, though, you can take the queen, and that's probably the right way to play this. And this position is about even once again, so nothing to worry about. So you can avoid the queen trade for a while, but it seems like when queen f3 is played, the queens are coming off sooner or later. So that's another way for white to play, but queen to d2 is the more popular move in this case. So let's back up, and let's do the Scotch game from the start here. d4, e takes d4, knight takes, and we're looking at the bishop c5 line. We looked at the two knight moves, knight dropping back or knight taking. But actually the top choice, and one I also see quite a lot in practice, is bishop to e3. Bishop e3 and knight takes c6 are about equal in popularity, but this is slightly more popular. And now the main move here, once again, is queen f6. But first of all, I want to show something. I play the move bishop b6 here as a way of getting just a playable position with black and without too many complications. I'm not too fond of the early queen move, although technically it's probably a better move. But since players may not be too used to this bishop b6 retreat right away, I mean, one idea is just to get this bishop off of a square where it's loose, so there's no discovered attacks with this knight moving suddenly. So it just simplifies the handling of the position to drop the bishop back here. A lot of times white players will just start taking stuff. So knight takes knight, pawn takes, bishop takes bishop, pawn takes. And this is a position that's better for black. You see that even the development is even. It's white's turn to move, so white will get a piece out, but typical kind of opening advantage. But in a sense, black's already got a developed piece. He's got the open A file. He can look forward to getting some pressure on this pawn. He can play d6 and bishop to e6. And there's just a slight edge for black in this position. These pawns, maybe they look a bit funny, but actually they are better. They've been improved by being pulled closer to the center. So these are good pawns over here. It may be a little bit tricky to advance them. You have to worry about them becoming locked up. But if you take care, this position is a slight advantage for black. So you don't need to worry about all of these trades. In fact, the best move for black at this point, the best move for white at this point, is to try and take advantage of this g-pawn and throw in the move knight f5 attacking it. There's also, I think, a queen move here. Let's see. Just want to check something in the database. Oh, just the developing move knight c3 is popular as well. Okay. But knight f5. So, okay, the most popular move is knight c3, and that makes a lot of sense, just continuing to develop. What I wanted to point out, though, is with knight f5, you can answer this move with g6, because the knight cannot really go into g7 here. It can get one check, but after king f8, the knight is trapped. So after g6, play usually proceeds bishop takes, pawn takes, and then the knight drops back to e3. And this is an okay position for black. You've created some weaknesses on the dark square, so you have to take some care. But well, black is going to be able to get all his pieces out. You can play d6, so this bishop has a way out. And let's see, what's a good move for white here? Just developing with his knight. It's not going to be too easy for white to get a quick attack on the dark squares. Knight to e7, and black is ready to castle. So again, this is an okay position. Maybe with an edge to white, though. I think so. This kind of play is perhaps why the bishop b6 move is not so popular. So that's something to keep in mind. This knight f5, it gives maybe some edge to white. Let's see. Was there another move after knight f5? After knight f5, you could also try bishop takes here. Let's see. Is there time? Then there's no time for knight takes g7 check again, because king f8 will once again attack the knight. I guess it's getting out, but then there's a problem in that white is already a piece down, and after he rescues the knight, the bishop can be saved. So he's got to take back. And okay, and this is an okay position for black. Okay, so that's the bishop b6 line. I didn't want to spend too much time on that because it's not the main line, but that's actually the way I play it. So after bishop e3, the top choice here is queen to f6, and just piling up the pressure on the knight. And the main response here is c3, defending. And keep this c3 move in mind because it's going to show up in when I talk about the bishop c5 line, bishop b4 check line. So queen f6, in a sense, provoked this c3 move to defend the knight. The knight was just under attack. And now black can continue developing with knight to e7. And white has a couple ways to go here. There's actually an idea of playing g3 and bishop to g2, or just the more direct move, which is also more popular, bishop to c4. And now black can get in the move knight to e5 with the tempo on the bishop, or he can just castle immediately. And both sides can play this position for it's maybe there's a slight edge to white, but it's basically quite a solid defense for black as well. And what I like about it is that all of black's pieces are coming out. He's getting the pawn to d6 move in. The bishop's going to have some squares to go to, and it should be okay. You do want to play d6 fairly soon. I don't like to leave this bishop here undefended for too long, but you do have a couple tempo moves, so like knight to e5. Just for an example, kicking the bishop back. I was thinking the bishop would drop back to b3, but actually bishop to e2 is the most popular move. I guess keeping an eye on these squares where the knight might hop into. And then d6 could be played here, or castles, or continuing to play interesting chess with queen g6. That's actually the main move in the book, trying to put pressure here on white. But anyway, as often happens, these lines just continue, but it should be a playable position for both sides. So after queen f6 should be okay. Queen f6, c3, and knight g e7. And depending on what white does here, there's various things that black can play. Okay, so that is all I'm going to talk about on the main line. But now I wanted to bring up this other move here. Okay, so we're going back to the beginning. Knight to f3, attacking the pawn. Knight to c6, defending. Now d4. The Scotch game, just continuing to attack the center, exchanging and taking back. And we were looking at bishop c5, but I wanted to show this other move, bishop b4 check, that ChessExplained likes to play. A bit of a sideline, but not bad. This sort of provokes the move c3, which I mentioned actually this move c3 in the other line. So white is getting in this move for free in a way, because the bishop drops back to e3 here. So this creates some slight differences. One thing is that white can take here and force black into lines where black takes with the pawn, typically the b pawn here. The main idea is, or the point is, that queen to f6 no longer works. This is threatening checkmate, but now because of the pawn on c3, the knight can just drop back to d4, blocking the bishop, and white is a piece up. So queen f6 is just not a playable move, and so that forces black into this line where the pawns are exchanged. Now, this doesn't mean this is super great for black, but seems like black has some edge here. He can continue with the bishop to d3, knight e7, castles, typical play here, and then knight to d2. And, well, you know, both sides have gotten castled, but maybe there is some slight edge for white in this position. He's got knight to g6 coming, kicking the bishop, and later on he can play bishop to e3, or if he wants to challenge the dark squared bishop. And well, black still has a couple of moves to play to finish his development, d6, and getting the light squared bishop out. So that is actually, I think that's the main way of, oh no, that's not the main way of playing, but I think maybe that's the best way of playing this line for white after the bishop comes back. Just take on c6 here and go into those lines where black is not allowed to play queen to f6, which is the main reply after knight takes c6 normally. But the main move in the database is bishop to e3, and that's what often happens in the games that ChessExplained plays. That people seem to prefer this bishop e3 move. And now, once again, queen to f6 is no idea here. This knight is already solidly defended, so the bishop just drops back to b6. So it starts to look kind of like the way I play. It starts to look like the way I play the black side of the Scotch, where I go bishop to c4 first, and then bishop, in response to bishop to e3, I drop the bishop back. Well, anyway, without this queen f6 move in, it seems to be an okay position for white. White has maybe some edge here. He can, once again, white can try this knight f5 maneuver. And I think bishop takes is still the main response here. g6 also can be considered, but bishop takes, and then knight to f6 developing, or you know, I always worry about this a little bit. In this case, it's not possible to play the move e5 to chase the knight away, so knight f6 is a good move here. And f3, the pawn can be defended this way. And we get this kind of position, and black can castle. And later on, he's going to push the d-pawn forward and bring the bishop out. This looks like a reasonable position for black. He hasn't suffered any pawn damage playing this way, and I think it's pretty comfortable for black. So it's an okay way to play. I think it's a little more challenging to black against that bishop b4 check line. It's a little more challenging to go ahead and take on c6. So that's what I would play as white there. Okay, so that wraps up my coverage of the Scotch game. In the next video, I'm going to start talking about the 4 knights. Stay tuned for that. See you then.